I just got kicked off myself.
We all did.
Oh, okay.
So,
I thought
so
it was a me thing.
no, ma'am, it was all of us, and that's why we are doing the best to start
I
again.
just got kicked off myself.
Yes, ma'am. So we all did. So,
Okay. Well, thank you for coming back.
no, ma'am, it was all of us, and that's why we are doing the best to start again.
I just got kicked off myself.
Yes, ma'am. So we all did. So,
well, thank you for coming back.
no, ma'am, it was all of us, and that's why we are doing the best to start again.
I just got kicked off myself.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh my. We're on repeat.
So we are now live on YouTube, as you have heard.
Lovely.
So and I apologize about that. Ms. Rambo is about to rejoin, so we will go ahead and pick up where we left off.
Okay, great. So Ms. Williams, would you like to continue with what you were discussing with Ms. Rambo?
Well, actually, she had asked a question and I had responded. Now she was in the middle of her next question and I have no idea what that was.
Did you already discuss 1955?
No, I have not talked about 1955. 1955 is an interesting story. I wanted to try to ensure that people remember some of what it was like to exist as a Black person in this country in 1955. And I chose 1955 because that was the year that my mind just went blank.
Emmett Till?
Emmett Till was killed. And that really left a heck of an impression on me. And the image has stayed with me all these years. And I remember his mother saying that she deliberately had him in an open casket so people could see what was done. And so the story actually evolved because of my desire to remember from whence we came.
Well, that
I was a little girl in New York who, my father was from North Carolina, and so he would, send me to North Carolina fairly regularly.
Well, needless to say, I personally was shook, and I initially thought that was you.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's how wrapped up I got in this narrative.
Okay, yeah. Well, I tried to make it as viable. I tried to write from the standpoint of myself in the center of something, whether it's true or not. I try to place myself in that situation. I tried to create a situation that is going to move the story. And then I try to put myself right smack dab in the middle of it and try to write from that point of view.
Well, it was very effective. Does anybody else would like to add to any comments in regards to 1955? Dr. Frazier, I see your hand being raised.
I did. I was very impressed with the story 1955. And, I too, like Georgia, at first thought you were the protagonist. So now I had some clarity to, realize the fictional element. But I was curious about your reference to Daddy being white and from Ireland. And if you could talk a little bit about that and the cultural differences you saw there and how that played into the story.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I realized early on, I grew up in an immigrant community. And one of the things I knew from my own family is that a lot of our blood came from Ireland, Scotland, and so on. And so I tried to utilize that in a way that would have an impact in the story. I think it also lends itself to a different view. It allows one of the characters to not be as aware of what it is to be Black in America. And so it provides some sort of balance and tension also, actually. in the story. Mhm.
Thank you.
As I read it, I was reminded of my sister and I doing the opposite during one of the Negro migration periods, being on the train in the back already because it was the colored car, and seeing your side and coming down. And we knew that kids from the North always come down south for the summer. It's the best summers,
Mhm.
and the parents are free. Someone meeting me on the and
We seem to be losing you. Your voice keeps coming in and out.
She's buffering, yeah.
Ms.
Ms.
Williams,
better
if you'll be able to type out your
raise it.
if
Does that help?
possible, if you could type out your comment, and
Okay.
that way we can read it out, that might
In the
help
chat,
because you
yes.
are kind of going in and out, okay?
Mhm.
And I also see that Miss Rambo is back on. If you'd like to-
I have returned
Thank
like a
you.
bad penny.
That's so.
I missed the conversation. I assume it was about 1955.
Correct. We tried to pick up from where you left off.
Okay, thank you. So the 1955, the comment that I wanted to make about it was I found it stunning that the family did not give her the talk before she went south by herself into that. That for me was the one piece that was a little difficult to fathom. And I wasn't quite sure how old she was, but she was old enough to have a mouth as fierce as Regina's really is. So,
Well,
Yeah.
let me say this. I am aware of the fact that she had not had the talk. And that's
Yeah.
there because for many of us who were sent south, we were sent to family members. We were expected to stay primarily with family, to be on the farm or wherever it was.
right.
And in my case, my uncles, my Uncle Ed had a farm and they would always take me out to the farm, and I would always try to come visit my brother in the city. I hated being out on the farm because I couldn't get into as much mischief, although I managed to get into a good.
I was
goodly
going to
amount.
say you were quite successful despite the barriers.
Yes, I was. I
Mhm.
stole my uncle. I managed to steal his truck and drive back to the city when they wouldn't take me when I wanted to go. But anyway, whoo, I will not forget that one. But anyway, yeah, I left that fact there because I think for a lot of African Americans, they do get that talk. And that's the whole point here, that she never got the talk. One of her parents is white. Her mother is thinking she's going to her family. So that was basically the setup.
But on public transportation. And,
Yeah.
and knowing that the public transportation during Jim Crow was not about equality of any kind. There was no equity in that transaction.
No, but that's why
So
you
that
pay.
was
That's why you
yeah.
pay the porter. That's why you pay the porter to.
Well, yeah, but the
Mhm.
porter can't do the talk like a
That's
parent
right.
can do
That's
the talk.
true. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, so you want to go to Rashida's tale, since you said you wanted to do the ends.
Well, Rashida's tale is actually Doris Kennedy's story.
Yes. Yes.
Doris Kennedy, also known as Reshwet, was an artist, and she was here in the Low Country, and she was light skinned with light eyes. And one of the things that would always happen was people would walk up to her and ask her where she got her eyes. And it would infuriate her. It would absolutely infuriate her. And so I wrote that story in honor of Reshwet,
Yes.
to honor the situation she found herself in. As Black people, we know that we are just Black. It doesn't matter whether it's damn near white or purple. We are still Black. We're treated as Black. If we live in a poor neighborhood, we still don't get heat because the landlord doesn't have to provide it. Whatever all those issues are. But in her case, she ended up having a lot of things thrown at her because of the way she looked. And I just thought that was my tribute to her.
And may I mention that Reshwet was also in the book club, which Regina and I are in, and a member of our church. And as a part of the church experience, she had been invited to host a committee that considered itself erasing racism and talking about race. And it was a very complicated event for her, to say the very least. Very complicated. So anybody else want to comment on the bookends? Come on now, let's jump on in. All right, now the next piece that has 2 votes is the principal story. And what does promise mean to you? Anybody? When you hear the word promise, what comes to mind? It's the title of the book. Hint, hint. Nope, nobody talking. Hope. Come on, Linda. Come on. So promise means hope. And I would have to jump in. Oh, and that's one of the things I wanted to say about these stories. You know how some people are very timid, and when they're getting ready to get in the swimming pool, they stick in their big toe, and then they put in all the toes, and then they put into the ankle, and they do this gently. I will have to say that Regina clearly believes in complete immersion immediately. So she throws us into the swimming pool at the beginning. I mean, the grass was green and the birds were singing and the house had just been painted blue. No.
Well,
my daddy didn't give me the talk. Boom, there you are, right there. Anyway, so to the promise. And promise, go ahead, come on.
Okay. I don't know if I can be. Oh, I'm sorry. I just wasn't sure if this is.
Yes,
wasn't
Deborah,
sure
I recognize your voice.
You do? Okay, good. I'm sorry, Ms. Rambo. I wasn't sure. Continue. I wasn't sure
Please.
if I.
Oh, no, you please.
Okay.
Go
So for me, Promise was one of the stories that I did select and that I loved. And it was first of all, the stories were engaging and I related to so many in general terms and in intimate terms. So I have to say that for me, Promise was a story. I like so many of the stories in here. It was a story of triumph. I was curious about the cover. I mean, when I first got the book, I was so excited about the cover. It was beautiful. It's beautiful art. And so reading Promise now, I kind of understood the cover a little more. I wanted you to talk to us a little bit about the cover. Did the art, how that came about? Because after reading the story, I'm seeing the cover for what it is in the story, but how did that come about? The cover and the art that gave her power.
Okay.
In the story.
Okay, the cover is from a piece of art by the artist Winston Kennedy, and it's from the title of the piece is Protection During the Middle Passage. So the art on the cover is not the art in the piece Promise. The piece in the in the story Promise is much more savagely portrayed
Oh, yeah.
with slashes and things of that sort. I don't think I would want to confuse the two, because the cover actually, for me, represents a promise of protection, of a new life, of always being able to be sustained, to be loved, to be a lot of things. In the full portrait, in the full painting on the cover, there's an arm extended. You're leaving Africa, you're going forward, and the hand is actually over where a heart would be, but it's a Khan symbol. Okay, and so that's a whole other discussion. So I guess my question to Deborah would be, which painting do you want me to talk about?
So what you've spoken about the cover is fascinating. I love that. So you kind of spoke to that, and please, Winston Kennedy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Huge props for this.
And Doris Kennedy, and there is a connection.
Oh, there is a connection. Okay, so I love the cover. But because we're speaking about the story, and if you can address that, then
Okay.
the painting and the power painting in the story.
Yes, that painting in the story is actually pivotal to the story. One of the things, okay, let me back up a minute. I came along at a time when I was very fortunate to be able to interact with a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, a lot of writers, mostly in, not just those in Harlem, but the workshop that I was in was run by Quincy Troop, and he would bring a lot of people to the workshop and introduce us and have us sit and talk with these people. One of the things that I've always been impressed with, my husband, for some reason, I'm always attracted to the artist. My husband was an artist. And so when I look at a painting, I climb in with my whole being. And so when I described that painting, I was trying to describe the woman's anger, her hurt, her complete devastation, but her awareness that she was not going to sit still for it. And so the story is called Promise because she entitled the piece Promise because she was promising him. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise that if you do not honor this family, there will be consequences. And that's what that piece was about. And it, yeah. And it was a constant reminder. If you notice, it was placed in the center of the art gallery.
And
you couldn't avoid it.
And,
on a wall that had been created for it.
Just for it, right.
For
its center, right.
And not for sale ever. It was never going to be for sale.
No, not for sale.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And had rage in it.
A lot of rage.
A
lot of a lot of red, a lot of clunk oil that is left chunky. It's not smoothed out. It's not blended. It's
like blood clots.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And rightly so. I would think that was expressing her feelings.
Yes. Because as an artist, that's what you do. You use your medium to express your feelings, your thoughts, your hurts, your anguish, all of that.
Yeah. Anybody else have a feeling about or a comment that they want to share?
Now, I also named the book Promise.
Yes.
I didn't address that, but part of the reason I named it Promise, this is really crazy. The original title of the book was Journey to Accra. When I
Oh.
thought about it, nobody knew. A lot of people would not know where Accra was. They wouldn't know, any of those kinds of things. And I realized that in terms of marketability, that was not going to fly. So I then I was reading the story promise to my publisher. She was reading it to me. That's what it was. She was reading it to me. And I stopped her. I said, that's the name of the book. That's the new name of the book. And the reason it was the name of the book was because I really felt that the word promise in and of itself held so very much that I wanted people to look at it and say, what is the promise? What is it that is going to be offered in this book? What is it promising me? What can my life promise me? What is the promise I make to myself?
And the title by itself also suggests that it might be someone who shows great promise.
Promise, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So
all of the above.
It's definitely futuristic, but it has a variety of levels, like much of your stuff does.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to say the choice of the title seems to me to be also because you are a writer of short stories, but you're also a poet, which is a different genre, and it shows up in the prose. And in many ways, lots of the phrases are poetic, but they're concise, and they have this sense of immersion and presence.
Mm-hmm.
And this one definitely has the story has much to commend it and can be reread a number of times, I would think. One of the, you talked about not calling it the Journey to Accra, and Journey to Accra is one of the stories that got in the top category. So if no one objects, would you like to go to Journey to Accra?
Yeah.
So how many people here present have been to Accra? Hands, please.
Well, you can't see my hand, but
Okay. Yeah, that's true, Deborah. I can't. I see a little.
Yes.
Okay, so Regina, Deborah. Did I miss anybody? Well, Ruth. Okay. All right. So how long were you there? Not how long was the character there? How long were you there?
I had an import business for a number of years. And so I went back and forth to Accra many times over the period of about 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. Most of my trips, most of my stays there would be approximately 5 weeks. All right. That was the average 5 weeks. I would not necessarily stay in Accra because trying to find product, I would move. Basically, I would arrive in Accra, have a crate built, and then I would pick the villages that I wanted to go to for specific reasons. I would get in the car with my business partner, and we drive to the villages, put in our orders for kente cloth or for stools or for whatever the product was. And then we get to what's now Benin. It was Dahomey at the time. And we would rest there for a week or two and then start back and collect the items. So Accra for me was, at the time that I was there, Black folks were talking about the motherland.
Yes.
Going to the motherland. And they had this idea of what Africa was like that had nothing to do with the price of tea in China, in history, in memory, in anything. And so I was always frustrated when, people would approach me and talk about Accra and stuff. So anyway, Journey to Accra was about being anchored for many people, a place to be anchored. And because this, yeah, you know, like if you think about it, remember Stevie Wonder was going to build a house in Ghana. Various and sundry people were going to move to Ghana. It was like this Mecca that everybody wanted to go to and do this and that and the other thing. And so Journey to Accra, that particular story, ends in Accra because it was the only way to affirm what had happened in the story. Okay. When someone changes gender, when someone decides to change gender, it's not a simple, easy thing. And nowadays it's a lot easier. There are a lot of, you know, the surgeries are simpler and things of that sort. But when you think about a person who has lived a life as male or female or whatever, and then suddenly decides to change, it's never sudden, but it seems to outsiders that it's sudden. And so the one part of the personality, the one part of that couple that needed to be retained, that needed to be the anchor for those who are left behind, so to speak, was the anchor that she needed to take him to where he wanted to be ultimately, so that she could be free, if that makes any sense. I don't know how to explain it a whole lot. A journey of any kind of transition is so difficult that people tend to latch on to either their faith, their, you know, their art. Something has to anchor them, okay, when they make those kinds of decisions. And that's what I was really trying to get at in that story.
The setting for such a transition and such a marked change of life, that's a major change of life and acknowledgement. I don't see Accra as being a place or a setting in which that would be the more comfortable behavior.
But that's where his ashes went. He did not go to Accra.
Yes.
His ashes went to Accra. So it was his spiritual journey home. It didn't matter whether it was male, female, or whatever. Okay. It was the spiritual journey home.
Yeah, that's, yes. Still symbolically, it feels like a strange resting place.
The ocean?
Mm-hmm.
Ocean is never a strange resting place, I don't think.
Okay.
I'm a water person. What can I tell you? It seems like a natural place for me. Whenever I'm stressed, guess where you find me?
At the beach. I know exactly.
You know, this narrative is so complex, and you know, when you're discussing this in regards to being his ashes going to Accra, I'm also thinking of the enslaved Africans and those that resisted and they jumped overboard so they would not further be enslaved in some place that would be unknown to them.
And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave.
There you go.
And go home to my place to be free. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I also,
it's a return. What is it? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You return to where you came from. Yeah.
And I also equated that, you know, he lived a tortured life.
Oh my goodness, yes.
I mean, he's in love with Tina, and he's kept this great secret away from her for so many years.
You know, I met someone once who was transitioning. And the thing that struck me was that he had to leave home in order to do that. He moved to Canada. He moved to Canada because people here were not very accepting of what was going on in his life. And the only clue that I had, this was interesting when I think back to this man, he was an artist and we worked in the same place. And he was very androgynous. And the one thing he had was the pinky nail on each hand had a design painted in it. That was the only indication to me. And most people didn't notice it. They just figure he's an artist.
Yes. Yes. Well, there is that artists are not perceived as being like the rest of us. And they aren't.
But the actual, all that torment and stuff, is based on people that I encountered along the way who were struggling. And I guess the fact that I did not ostracize or didn't make a judgment meant that they were willing to share information with me in a way that I had not thought about some of these things. Yeah.
Now, I have to interject before we go on. I received an email and it should have really went to Miss Rambo. I'm not sure if Miss Rambo read it, but one of our members, if I could call her name out, because I do want her to speak on it. She did have basically a question in regards to the connection of all the African centered narratives. Pam, if you'd like to elaborate on the question.
Unmute and talk.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Sorry, tilting here, there. Here I am. Thank you, Georgette. I read Ms. Williams, your biography in the back, so I know you're very well traveled. And now you've kind of explained that you actually had a import business and went to Accra and West Africa for that reason. But I was interested in the fact that the stories were kind of spread throughout the book. So they seem connected to a life experience, but then disconnected a little bit too. So, you've sort of answered some of this already by what you've told, but I wondered about how you positioned them, because they're linked in some ways and yet they're kind of separate in the sequence.
Well, I had 30 some odd stories that were not necessarily connected. Those that were thematically connected, I did not want to bunch them all together. So when I decided the order of the stories, I chose to go from the time era in which a story takes place and to put them together in that order, in a time frame. So because I'm going back and forth, the time frame of different things happen historically in these various countries. And so they're actually in that order, but that was not necessarily something I expected people to pick up on.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
Yeah, well, it wasn't meant to be. It was just my way of trying to figure out how to order the stories, because they were not connected. They were not written at the same time. They were not written all at one time with the goal of being bound together in a book.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so I had to come up with some way to find order in all of that.
I wonder if it was connected to the statement that you make on the back of the book, which I'd love to hear you elaborate on a little bit. About each tale offers a brief reflection of some of those markers on the journey from self to self.
Yes, that's exactly what the whole book is. That's what the whole book is about, really. Each story is a bit of a way of a character, a protagonist, of coming to some awareness of an issue, of a concern, of watching yourself grow, all of those things. And so for me, a lot of the stories are written because I had a question, like for instance, and I haven't written this story yet, but it's one of the things that struck me. When I first moved to South Carolina, I was sitting in Earth Fair, having lunch, and there were two older women behind me, and they kept referring to, oh, the little peculiar institution, a little peculiar institution. And they had the little white gloves and the little hats sitting in Earth Fair having lunch. And I was like, what in the ham fat are they talking about? And so, I went on about my business, and then people would make various references and I would hear these things and I'd come home and write them down because I didn't know what the ham fat they were. But I had enough sense to, I'm curious, so I will wait and see what bubbles up to the top. And eventually I figured out that the peculiar institution was enslavement. Okay. But for someone moving down here, I was like, and I'm looking at the two little old ladies and I'm thinking that, like, what could they possibly be talking about? The way they look, they should have been having tea and crumpets, but that's the kind of thing that intrigues me, that will make me then sit down and say, okay, what were they really talking about? Or what about those people who are enslaved? What about them? How would they feel in such and such a situation? So that's the kind of thing that would motivate me. And so each of the stories, there's something that scratched at me that said, you need to tell something about this. You need to raise the question. You need to raise the alarm, even if you don't have an answer.
Interesting. I must say, as I was reading, a lot of times I was wondering, does the author have a personal experience with this situation? So you've kind of answered that.
Well, sometimes, one of the things that I tell people, I was recently interviewed, and the first thing the woman said was, are these stories true? And I said, well, writers tell lies to get at the truth.
Oh, that's a great line.
Okay. And so, but I don't know if she printed, I don't remember what you printed, but I will say that you write from what you know. So I'm not going to write a story that takes place in a place I have no idea of what it looks like. I've got to know what it looks like, what it feels like, so that I can write. Or a situation, I need to have some sense of the people and how they're moving around. Who are these people? So it has to be grounded in something I already know to be able to reach that larger something. So I might describe something right outside my window, but it's not because the story is about what's going on in my house or my yard. Okay. Yeah.
And last month you made a comment about the format and subway stops and wanting to write something that people could. Were you being serious about that too?
Could read between Yeah. Most people have the attention span of a gnat. Okay. And so when I think about it, the thing for me is, how do I get your attention and how do I hold it long enough for you to finish the story? All right. And
well, you dunk us in fast and pull us out equally as quickly.
One of my favorites is flash fiction. I love writing.
That's what you called it. Yes.
Flash fiction. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I had never heard that, but it makes sense. And as somebody who used to ride the subway, it does make sense to be able to finish I always was trying for a chapter in a book because I had a long commute from downtown to Brooklyn. So I could usually do a chapter of a novel, but your stories are, you can almost do them in 2 stops.
Conversely, have you ever written a story of this length and then thought, I want to develop that into a much longer?
Actually, I wrote a story. Actually, I wrote a poem that then became a short story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you're not interested in a longer, like, novel or?
The writing group I belong to, they're all novelists.
Mm.
And they're always encouraging me to write a novel. And I don't have a real particular interest in writing a novel. However, having said that, if I do, I think I would do it in a series of short stories.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So short story writers of your choosing, who do you read? Who does short stories?
Oh my goodness. That's a good question. Well, a lot of the novelists actually write short stories. They have collections of short stories. And for some reason, nothing is coming to my mind when you ask me who I read. If I could see that far, I could answer you. I'm sorry, I can't answer that one right now. But one of the people who I really who they were not short stories per se, but Octavia Butler.
I was going to say, yeah.
Octavia
Oh,
Butler
okay.
was one of the people that really influenced me in many ways, even though I'm not writing fantasy or I'm not in the same medium. That's the first one that comes to mind.
There's an anthology of short stories by Black writers that, now that you mention Octavia, that are basically about speculative fiction,
Mhm.
and it's called Dark Matters.
Right, that's right.
And some people that Du Bois has a short story in there, which really floored me because I never thought of him as any kind of
that's why I
fiction.
said a lot of people that you don't think of have written
as
short stories,
right.
like Toni Morrison and
Yes.
Alice Walker, and
Yeah.
you know, they've all written.
Zora Neale was notorious.
Zora Neale Hurston, that's right.
Yeah. So they're there. Our next one is, and I don't know, I'm mindful of the time because I'm noticing that we have a lovely crowd, and I'm so delighted to see all of you, Osei and Barbara and Deborah and Rosalind, everybody. If I didn't mention it isn't because I didn't notice you're here. It's wonderful. Thank you. And I need to say that the book, this reading circle would make, I believe, Dr. Francis very happy to have continued this thought that she had, that we should be looking at this art and understanding it and promoting it in a way that would, I'm pleased that her name is on it. And I think that will keep us at a high standard. And this is really a marvelous group, and I'm so happy for the growth of it, and encourage you to bring somebody when you can to the group so that we can enjoy together and look at these various genres from different lenses, which is so rich. It makes it a very rich opportunity for all of us, nonetheless. Now, in the village of Elmina, and the door of no return, and the site that is it is a homage, if you go to the motherland, to go there. So I think the two spots for me are Goree Island and Elmina. That
I've
are
been to
rich.
both, yeah.
Yeah,
They are.
yeah. And the Obamas went, so that gives a great validity and credibility. So take us. Did anyone who's on notice or vote for a discussion of Elmina, and if so, why'd you choose it, and what do you need to know?
Well, it's just a wonderful, fascinating little story. It was short. It was very short, and but so much in there in that tale. And of course, you know, several people in here do the remembrance program or involved with that. And so that kind of touched my heart a lot. I've been to Elmina, but this story, you know, covered it from another kind of place. So I just thought it was wonderful. The elder gentleman had, you know, asking the questions. And so if Ms. Williams, our author, could just speak to that a little bit more, that would be great. It was just a wonderful little story. That's all I can say. And we would love to hear a little bit more about her experiences there in Elmina.
Well, Elmina, most people go to the castle or the fort or whatever it's called, but they don't venture forth into the village.
Right.
And one of the things I'm always curious about, how people live, where they live, how they cook their food, you know, and things like that. I want to see it prepared. I want to smell it. I want to taste it. I'm up in it. Okay. And when I would go to villages, I would always go to the village and stay in the village. All right. I did not stay in hotels in my travels. But in Elmina, it was just a very strange experience. That was actually, the woman did stand there staring at me, scaring me half to death, but she was so stoic, but so serious. But I think it was the old man, Kafi Dapo. And that is the name of a real person, Kafi Dapo. And that was a situation where someone literally challenged me, because how do you encapsulate 400 years of history? It forced me to really think about, how do you tell someone what happened? What was his question? What happened what became of you when you left here?
Yeah.
How do you answer that? And what does it mean that he asked?
Well, you disappeared.
Huh?
We were rebaptized as Ghanaians by a unity minister on our trip.
Interesting.
I went with Ruth King.
Okay.
And one of the things that he said was, and we wondered where you went. You went into the bush to get firewood.
And you never came back.
To kill a lion, and you never came back. And we didn't know why, and we didn't know where you were, and we didn't know how you were being, what had happened.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so all this time, we were confused. We didn't know what happened.
Well, so the whole point was, that they're confused, as are we. We thought they knew, and they thought we knew.
I thought they were, in many cases, I thought they were much more instrumental in our departure. I know
some were. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, for the average person who's in a village, they don't necessarily know.
No.
Now, Kafi Dapo was old enough to remember some stuff. All right. But for the most part, the people in Elmina, if you go into the village, like I said, they look like me. They don't look like the rest of the Ghanaians.
Right.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And so that story was really meant to try to kind of bridge a gap and at the same time expose the issue that is still unresolved.
Yeah. It's a wonderful little story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions? Okay. I would, can you share a kind of summary statement, Regina, that would direct us as to when you finished the book and you looked at it in the way that you presented it, the order that you felt the story should be digested in, and the what was the number one thing that you wanted us to take away from this experience? What, as the writer, what was your optimum goal for us as your readers? You're loyal and devoted, committed, and forever readers. Whatever else you're going to write, we're going to be right there to read it. You can be assured of that. So, because obviously Georgette started out with the
Thank you, Georgia.
you are a writer.
Yes. An
First of
excellent
all,
writer.
Thank
You
you. First,
are
let me say
a
thank
writer.
you. Let me say thank you
Oh,
to this
our
group
pleasure.
for having me and for allowing me to talk about some of what happened in the writing of this book, or
Mhm.
why it got written and how some of the stories got written. In terms of what I hope you would take away, there are 30 some odd stories in this book, and I'm hoping that each person would at least
they're more
read.
than 30. They're more than
Yes,
30.
the 30 some odd, right? I would hope that each person would at least remember one story enough to be able
Oh.
to tell me
Tell
what it
it.
was about.
Okay.
That would be my goal, not just to reiterate the plot, but hopefully my goal was that someone would be able to walk away with at least one story that
Okay.
made them go back and read it enough to be able to tell me what it was about.
Okay.
'Cause most
Now,
people read literally just what's on the page. And I know
Yes.
this group is not that. This group
No.
is beyond that. I know that. Yes.
Shame. Shame.
This
Of course
group
not.
this
Not
group
us.
digs in. This group digs in, and I appreciate that truly.
Yes. Yeah. It- you had indicated that you felt that each story was sort of like a link in a chain, or a piece of thread in a fabric
Yeah.
that would bring us from ourselves to
To
another
ourselves.
part of
Mhm.
ourselves, as we
Mhm.
are from self to self, and that
Right.
is always changing. I think what I'm trying to hear you tell me is what what theme, what are you saying? Keep on the journey of reinventing yourself?
Of course, I'm saying that. I'm saying that until you do that, the promise of all the gifts that each of us has is everybody has a gift. And
Yes.
you've got to pursue that, whatever that is. That's the thing that you need to promise yourself, that I will take what I have, what I've been given, and utilize it.
Mhm. For the common good.
What they say, for the good of the order.
Yes,
For
but
the-
everybody do not leave yet. I have a couple of
Oh, no.
announcements.
I was looking forward to you to tell us particularly about next month,
Well,
and any other pieces of information you'd like to share. Thank you, Georgette.
Well, again, thank you, Ms. Williams, for writing Promise and being with us to share and discuss. Your book is wonderful. As I said, I can't help but keep raving about it because it's
Thank you.
excellent literature. I don't know if everybody went to chat, but Linda Lucas had wrote about 1955. Says, my reading 1955 put me on a train at 13 years old with my sister going in the opposite direction during one of the Negro migration excursions. I saw myself and saw you on the train, and we were in the colored car. Most Northern kids came home for the summer and often on trains whose names we still remember. A lot of children did not get the talk because families trusted families' protection. Thanks.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go on,
No,
Deborah.
So many of the stories were intimate experiences, and that was one of them for me as well. I was born in South Carolina, but grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and went back south every summer from when I was young with a shoebox with food, our food in it. And so I remember those from young, those train rides back to South Carolina from Brooklyn, again with a shoebox with fried chicken sandwiches and cake, coconut cake and stuff like that, you know. So that was an interesting, well, every story I related to on some level or the other.
Yes.
Yeah.
About the train trip, I have to say this. I was raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I went to college in Nashville, Tennessee. And so we rode the L&N, and it was immediately a segregated car. And this is what the benefit of it was. All of the students who were going to Tennessee State, Fisk, Meharry, and the Union Baptist Seminary were all together. It was a time, it was a party. It was a rolling party. And so I have to say that aspect of it as a grown, well, not grown, but yeah, the train has played a significant role in our history and our connectedness. And it is a form actually of social media, what we would consider to be social media now, that it served that kind of purpose for networking. So anyway, thank
You just muted, Miss Rambo, you just muted yourself.
you. Anything else, Georgette?
Yes, about next
Please.
month.
Pray continue.
Yes, next month, March the 17th, we will be reading and discussing Read Until You Understand, Black Life and Literature. And we will have our guest host, the Dr. Farah Jasmine Griffin, who is a scholar in African-American literature.
Oh, okay.
So she will be gracing us on March the 17th. And because everybody is here, our esteemed members, the Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture is providing a free copy of the book. I think I have everybody's address. If I don't, please email me and you will be getting the information about how to obtain the book. Either I will be mailing it or we will be doing Turning Page, our resident bookstore that we love to, our Black-owned bookstore in Somerville that we love to patronize. We'll be holding them, we'll be ordering from them. So great.
Are they still in
Thank you so much
Somerville?
to the Avery. The
Are
Avery
they-
has been quite a sponsor for us, and we are just delighted with the support. And out of it, we've been able to grow, and we're so thrilled to see so many of you here, and hope to see you in March.
Yes.
Yes.
So thank you for
Thank you.
staying. I know we stayed a little bit long,
you.
but I think it was
Thank
well
you.
worth it.
Thank
Thank
you.
And
you.
so glad to see all of you. Stay
Yes.
well. Stay well. Keep reading.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.